parents blamed me for the results of the Eurovision. Yes, you read that right. Back in 2006, when Eurovision was held in Athens, I was watching the contest at home with my mom and stepdad. It was supposed to be a normal night, or as normal as things could get in our house. The contest was a rare moment when we all sat down in the same room, shared snacks, and tried to enjoy something together. For once, it felt like we were playing the part of a regular family, the kind you see on TV commercials. Now, to give you a little context, my family was anything but normal. There was a lot of psychological abuse, thankfully never physical, but the emotional weight of living in that house was something I carried every day. Still, nights like these, when we could pretend everything was fine, were the moments I clung to. They felt like tiny lifelines in a sea of chaos. That evening, we had our chips and soda laid out on the coffee table. We were actually having fun. Then Lordi came on stage with their performance of Hard Rock Hallelujah. If you are unfamiliar with Lordi, please stop reading this and look them up. You need to see their costumes to truly understand the absurdity of what came next. My mom and stepdad were not religious people. They never went to church, never talked about God, and certainly never imposed any kind of moral or spiritual guidelines on me. So when they saw Lordi, I expected indifference at most. Instead, they burst out laughing. Not just chuckles, but full-on tear-streaming, can't-catch-your-breath laughter.
"What is this nonsense?" my mom said between fits of giggles. "Who thought this was a good idea?"
"They look like rejects from a Halloween costume sale," my stepdad added, holding his stomach as he laughed. I laughed nervously along with them at first, not wanting to draw attention to myself. But then I made the mistake of speaking up. "Actually," I said hesitantly, "I know this band. I like them. I even have their CD." The room went quiet for a moment. I regretted the words as soon as they left my mouth. "You what?" my mom said, her smile fading into a look of disbelief. "I like them," I repeated, quieter this time. "I think they're cool." "Oh, you think they're cool, huh?" my stepdad said, his tone dripping with mockery. "Well, that explains a lot." I felt the heat rising in my cheeks, but I tried to brush it off. "Yeah, whatever," I muttered, heading to my room to grab the CD. I thought maybe if I showed it to them, they would at least see that I was serious about my interest in music. Maybe they would take me seriously for once. Big mistake. When I came back with the CD, their laughter returned, only this time it was directed at me. "You are as ridiculous as they are," my mom said, shaking her head. "Your whole generation is ridiculous." I was used to comments like that. It was just part of the background noise of my life. So I shrugged it off and sat back down. The night carried on, and for a while, it felt like we had moved past it. We were still together, still watching, still enjoying the competition. Then Lordi started winning. With every set of points they received, my excitement grew. But as I got happier, my parents got angrier. I could see it in the way their jaws clenched and their hands tightened around their drinks. By the time Lordi was crowned the winner, I was practically bouncing with excitement, but I knew better than to show it. "Unbelievable," my stepdad muttered. "This is what people vote for now? This is what the world has come to?" I tried to explain, to soften the blow. "They are a well-known band," I said. "They have fans all over Europe. That's probably why they won." But my reasoning only seemed to make things worse. "Oh, so you are defending them now?" my mom snapped. "Of course you are. You and your freaks. You think this garbage is art?" I wanted to cry, but I knew that would only make things worse. "I am not saying that," I tried to explain. "I just think..."
"Do not you dare start playing the victim," my stepdad cut me off. "You are always the victim, aren't you? Poor you. No one understands you. No one likes your stupid music. And now you get to gloat because your freaks won."
That was when the punishment came. They took my computer, canceled a weekend trip I had planned with friends, and confiscated my allowance for disrespecting them. It was the kind of overreaction that had become typical in our house, but this time it hit harder. It felt so petty, so pointless. All of this over a Eurovision song? The next morning, I packed a bag and left. It was not the first time I ran away, and it would not be the last. Looking back now, it feels surreal that something as seemingly trivial as a music contest could spark such an eruption. But in that house, it was never about the thing itself. It was about control, about power, about reminding me that my opinions did not matter. And yes, in case you are wondering, I still love Hard Rock Hallelujah. Filipino 96. Well, if they can ruin your life over some event that happens yearly, let's see what happens when they decide to blame you for their dying in a nursing home. Realistic Noise 2. Was this with your psycho mom and stepfather? I did read one of your stories that you had to alternate between your father and mother's houses, but if this was with your mother, did you ever tell your father about all the insanity she caused? Or did he know about it and not say anything due to her going even more nuts? Liv Hannah. OP. This was my mom and stepfather. But if you know my stories, you know my dad and stepmother were not a much better choice. By court order, I had to live with my mother. I had the right to spend time with my father and sometimes go away with him. I ran away from both of them as soon as I turned 18. Years later, I reconnected with my father. I tried many times to rebuild my relationship with my mother, but each time it ended worse. I'm not planning to try anymore. Update 1 week later. First of all, thank you to everyone who took the time to read my post, share your thoughts, or even just sit with my story. Your comments, advice, and even the simple "I get it" responses meant more to me than I can say. It is strange how a bunch of strangers on the internet can feel more supportive than the people you have lived with your whole life. But here we are. Now, for the update. After I left home that night, I ended up going to a friend's place. Let's call her Elena. Elena has been my rock for as long as I can remember. She was the one who always noticed when things at home weren't okay, even when I tried to hide it. When I showed up at her door with my bag and puffy eyes, she didn't ask any questions. She just hugged me and said, "You can stay as long as you need." For the first couple of days, I felt a weird mix of relief and guilt. Relief because I was finally away from the constant tension and emotional roller coaster of my parents' house. Guilt because I had left without saying anything, without giving them a chance to explain themselves or even try to apologize. Not that I expected an apology, but still. I spent those days mostly lying low, eating whatever Elena had in her fridge and trying not to overthink.
But of course, overthinking is what I do best.
On the third day, Elena sat me down for one of her trademark tough love talks. She told me she was happy to have me there, but that running away would not fix anything in the long run. "You can crash here forever if you want," she said. "But do you really want this to be your life? Avoiding them? Always looking over your shoulder? At some point, you are going to have to deal with it." I hated that she was right. I did not want to deal with it, but I knew I had to. So, we came up with a plan. I decided I would go back home, not to move back in, but to have a real conversation with my parents. I wanted to tell them how I felt, set some boundaries, and try, if possible, to build some kind of healthier dynamic. But let's be real, I was terrified. The night before I went back, I barely slept. I kept running through every possible scenario in my head, from them slamming the door in my face to them acting like nothing had ever happened. Neither option felt great, but I knew I could not avoid it forever. So I went. When I walked up to the door, my stomach was in knots. I stood there for what felt like an eternity before finally knocking. My stepdad answered. He looked surprised to see me, but did not say anything right away. He just stepped aside and let me in. My mom was in the living room, watching TV like it was any other day. She glanced at me, raised an eyebrow, and said, "Decided to come back, huh?" It took everything in me not to snap at that moment. But I reminded myself why I was there. I told them I wanted to talk, and to my surprise, they actually sat down and listened. Or at least they pretended to. I started by telling them how I felt that night during Eurovision, how their comments and actions made me feel disrespected and humiliated. I told them it was not about the music or the contest, but about the way they always dismissed my interests and treated me like my opinions did not matter. I tried to stay calm and keep my voice steady, but my hands were shaking the whole time. Their response? Predictably disappointing. My mom rolled her eyes and said, "You are being dramatic. It was just a joke. We did not mean anything by it."
My stepdad chimed in with, "You are too sensitive. You need to learn to toughen up."
I tried to push back, to explain that it was not just that night, but a pattern of behavior that made me feel small and unimportant. But the more I talked, the more defensive they got. It felt like we were speaking entirely different languages. Eventually, I realized I was not going to get through to them, not that day anyway. So I shifted gears. I told them I was not there to blame them or rehash old arguments, but to set boundaries. I told them I deserved to be treated with respect and that I would no longer tolerate being mocked or belittled. They did not take it well. My mom called me ungrateful. My stepdad accused me of trying to play the victim again. But at that point, I had said what I needed to say. I stood up, thanked them for their time, and left. Walking away felt both freeing and heavy. I did not get the resolution I wanted, but I felt a small sense of victory for standing up for myself. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had some control over my life. I am still staying with Elena for now, but I am looking into more permanent living arrangements. I am also trying to focus on my mental health, which has taken a back seat for far too long. It is not easy, but I feel like I am finally moving in the right direction. And yes, I still listen to Hard Rock Hallelujah. Day 2 weeks later. So, here I am again, 2 weeks out from when I first shared my story. Let us just say things did not exactly go as planned. If you read my last update, you will know I went back home to talk to my parents, hoping for some kind of breakthrough. Spoiler alert, there was no breakthrough. The conversation, or whatever you want to call it, ended up being a mix of denial, defensiveness, and the same old patterns I have dealt with for years. I walked in trying to approach it as an adult, prepared to set boundaries and explain how their behavior affects me. I thought maybe, just maybe, if I said the right words or framed it the right way, they would finally understand. But instead, I hit a wall. A very tall, very stubborn wall. When I tried to bring up specific instances of how they had made me feel disrespected or humiliated, my mom brushed it off with, "You are overreacting. That is not how it happened." My stepdad added his 2 cents with, "You are always twisting things to make us look like the bad guys. Maybe you need to look in the mirror." I cannot say I was surprised. I have lived with their refusal to take responsibility for years, but it still stung. It was like trying to have a conversation with people who had already decided they were in the right no matter what. They dismissed my feelings as dramatic, invalidated my experiences, and doubled down on their own narrative. At one point, I even said, "I am not here to attack you. I am trying to make this better for all of us." My mom just laughed and said, "Better for all of us? You mean better for you? You just want to do whatever you want without considering how it affects us." That was the moment I realized we were not having a discussion. This was a power struggle, and they were determined to win. After about an hour of going in circles, I gave up. I did not slam the door or storm out. I was too exhausted for that. I just stood up, said, "I think we are done here," and left. On the way back to Elena's place, I felt a strange mix of anger, sadness, and relief. Anger at their refusal to even try to understand. Sadness because deep down, I had hoped for something different. And relief because at least I knew now that I had done everything I could. There was nothing left for me to fix. The next few days were rough. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, second-guessing everything I said. Should I have worded things differently? Should I have stayed longer? But then I realized something important. I cannot control how they react. I can only control what I do next. That is when I started looking for other options. I knew staying with Elena was not a long-term solution, no matter how generous and supportive she was. I needed to find a place where I could rebuild my life without constantly worrying about whether I was overstaying my welcome. After doing some research and talking to a few people, I found a local organization that helps young adults in situations like mine. They offer temporary housing, counseling, and other resources to help people get back on their feet. Reaching out to them was one of the hardest things I have ever done. There is something about admitting you need help that feels both empowering and terrifying. But I knew I could not keep living in limbo forever. The intake process was surprisingly straightforward. I had to share some details about my situation and explain why I felt unsafe at home. It was not easy to put everything into words, but the staff was incredibly kind and patient. They did not judge me or make me feel like I was exaggerating. For the first time in a long time, I felt like someone was really listening. Now, I am staying at one of their transitional housing facilities. It is not fancy, just a small room with a bed, a desk, and a shared kitchen, but it feels like a safe space. There is a counselor on site who checks in with me regularly, and they have workshops to help with things like budgeting, job applications, and emotional wellness. It is not perfect, but it is exactly what I need right now. Being here has given me the time and space to reflect on everything. I have started journaling again, something I used to love but had given up on because it felt pointless in the chaos of my old life. Writing things down helps me sort through my feelings and remind myself that it is okay to put my well-being first. As for my parents, I have not heard from them since I left. Part of me wonders if they are waiting for me to crawl back and apologize for daring to stand up for myself. But honestly, I do not think I owe them that. Not anymore. This is not the ending I wanted, but it is the beginning of something better. I am learning to let go of the idea that they will ever change. Instead, I am focusing on changing myself, on becoming someone who can thrive, even without their approval. And yes, I still have Hard Rock Hallelujah on repeat. Some things never change. 3. 1 month later. It has been a month since I shared my story, and I wanted to let you know how things have been going. When I left off last time, I had just moved into temporary housing provided by a local organization. To say it was a huge adjustment would be an understatement. Going from a place where I constantly felt on edge to somewhere I could finally breathe freely felt both liberating and strange. For the first time, I was not walking on eggshells. During my first week there, I had a mandatory session with one of the counselors. Honestly, I was not thrilled about it at first. I thought, what could they possibly tell me that I have not already figured out on my own? Spoiler, a lot. That first session was mostly about getting to know each other. I was guarded as usual, but the counselor, I will call her Marta, had a way of making me feel like I was not being judged. It was the first time I talked about my parents without feeling like I had to defend myself. Over the next few weeks, I started going to these sessions regularly. Marta helped me unpack a lot of the things I had buried over the years. She explained how growing up in a home like mine could distort the way I saw myself and my relationships. For example, I always thought I was being too sensitive because that was what my parents told me whenever I stood up for myself. But Marta showed me that having emotions is not the same as being overly sensitive. In fact, it is healthy to feel and express your emotions. It sounds obvious, but hearing it from someone else was like flipping a switch in my brain. One of the most valuable things I learned in counseling was how to set boundaries. I used to think boundaries were just a way to keep people out, but Marta reframed them as a way to protect my energy and prioritize my mental health. She also gave me practical tools for dealing with negativity. For example, instead of internalizing hurtful comments, she taught me to ask myself, is this really about me or is it about them? Spoiler, it is almost always about them. Beyond the counseling sessions, I also started getting involved in some of the activities offered at the shelter. At first, I was hesitant. The idea of joining a group of strangers and trying to fit in was intimidating. But one of the staff members encouraged me to try a music appreciation workshop. "You like music, right?" she asked. This might be a good place to start. So, I went. And it was one of the best decisions I have made in a long time. The group was small, just 6 of us, plus a facilitator, but we all shared a genuine love for music. The first session, we talked about our favorite bands, albums, and concert experiences. I was nervous about mentioning Lordi at first, given how my parents had reacted, but when I did, a guy in the group immediately lit up. "No way," he said. "They are awesome. Hard Rock Hallelujah is a classic." For the first time, I felt like I was not being judged for my taste in music. As the weeks went on, that group became one of my favorite parts of the week. We would share playlists, debate over underrated artists, and even plan hypothetical dream concerts. Through these interactions, I started to realize something I had not felt in a long time: connection. These were people who saw me for who I was, not who they thought I should be. It was refreshing, to say the least. I also started making friends outside the workshop. The shelter organizes weekly social events, movie nights, game tournaments, even a karaoke night that I never thought I would participate in but ended up loving. These events gave me a chance to meet people with different stories but similar struggles. Talking to them reminded me that I am not as alone as I once thought. One of the biggest breakthroughs came during a casual conversation with a girl named Clara, who had been at the shelter for a few months longer than me. She told me about her own struggles with self-worth and how finding a community had helped her rebuild her confidence. "You do not have to figure it all out at once," she said. "Just take it one day at a time. And do not be afraid to lean on people. You would be surprised how many are willing to support you if you let them." That stuck with me. I have always been someone who felt like I had to handle everything on my own. But I am learning that there is strength in asking for help and letting people in. Slowly but surely, I am starting to feel more like myself again. I am not just surviving. I am beginning to thrive. I have started journaling regularly, not just to process my thoughts, but to remind myself of the progress I am making. I have reconnected with parts of myself that I had forgotten, like my love for writing and exploring new music. There is still a long road ahead, but for the first time in years, I feel like I am on the right path. I am learning that I deserve kindness, not just from others, but from myself. And perhaps most importantly, I am beginning to believe it. And yes, if you were wondering, Hard Rock Hallelujah still holds a special place in my playlists. Now, though, it feels less like a guilty pleasure and more like a badge of honor. 4th, 3 months later. It's been 3 months since my last update, and things have been up and down. Honestly, some days feel like progress, and other days I'm just trying to make it through without completely losing my mind. But overall, I'm getting my life together, bit by bit. Here's where I'm at now. First, I got myself a part-time job. It's not glamorous, not anything I've dreamed of doing, but it's a paycheck. I'm working at a local cafe, which means early mornings, long hours on my feet, and dealing with all kinds of customers. But it's a steady income, and that's what I need right now. The people I work with are decent, no drama, and I'm just glad to be earning money. I've been putting most of what I make into savings, with the goal of becoming financially independent. It's slow, but every little bit helps. I can't say I'm rolling in cash, but I'm not living paycheck to paycheck anymore, and that feels good. I still have a long way to go before I can fully stand on my own, but I'm getting there. There's something satisfying about knowing I'm doing this on my own, without anyone else's help. At the same time, there's a certain level of stress that comes with it. Managing bills, saving money, figuring out how to get by when it feels like I'm still just getting started. It's not easy, but it's real life. And I'm starting to accept that things won't always be perfect. I'm just trying to keep my head above water. As for my relationship with my parents, yeah, it's still strained. If anything, it's more strained now than before. We don't talk much, and when we do, it's just awkward. They still don't really get where I'm coming from. I've tried to explain myself, but they just can't seem to understand. They still have their own version of events, and as much as I've tried to move on, it's hard when they keep acting like nothing ever happened. The anger I've been holding on to is still there, but I've learned to manage it. I've stopped expecting anything from them. I've started setting boundaries, which has helped a lot. I don't let them drag me into arguments or guilt trip me into doing things I don't want to do. It's not perfect, but I don't feel as trapped anymore. There are still moments when I get frustrated, and part of me wants to lash out, but I know that won't do me any good. I'm slowly learning that I have the right to protect myself, even if it means cutting off certain interactions. On the brighter side, I've been pushing myself to get back into music. It's something I've always loved, but I never fully pursued it, mostly because I didn't think I deserved to. Recently, though, I decided to stop holding back. I started looking into local bands, and to my surprise, one of them was looking for a guitarist. So I threw caution to the wind and sent them a demo. I didn't expect much, but they actually got back to me and invited me to audition. I'm still waiting to hear back, but just getting the invite was a huge confidence boost. It felt like a step in the right direction. The best part of getting back into music is being around people who get it. The workshop I joined has been great for that. It's a small group, but the vibe is amazing. We talk about music, share songs, and have real conversations about what we love. And for once, I don't feel like I have to hide my interests or apologize for liking something that doesn't fit with what other people expect. Being able to talk about music without feeling judged has been huge for me. In addition to that, I've been meeting other people who share my passion. One of them, Clara, has become a good friend. She's been at the shelter longer than I have and has been through her own struggles. She's the one who reminded me that I don't have to have it all figured out right now. She told me, "You've already come so far. Just keep taking small steps. You'll get there." I needed to hear that. Sometimes I get caught up in thinking that I should be further along by now, but I'm learning to take it one day at a time. There's no rush. Life is still tough, but I'm starting to feel like I'm moving in the right direction. It's not easy, but it's real. I'm working, saving, setting boundaries, and finding little things that make me feel like I'm not completely losing myself. I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm definitely closer than I was 3 months ago. And yes, Hard Rock Hallelujah is still on repeat. Some things never change. Booster. 1 week after update 4. Thank you all for continuing to follow my journey and for the support you've shown me throughout this process. I wanted to share a little story that has brought me some joy and positive energy recently. Yesterday, I decided to stop by a small cafe near where I work to relax for a bit. I was just sipping my coffee, quietly sketching some ideas for the band I'm hoping to join, when a stranger approached me. He noticed I was listening to Lordi through my headphones and, to my surprise, he said he was also a longtime fan of the band. We ended up talking for over an hour about Eurovision, music, and our personal passions. What really struck me was when he shared that it was Lordi's music that helped him get through a tough period in his life. In that moment, I realized something. What I love isn't just a personal interest, but a thread that connects me to kindred spirits. It's not just about the music, it's about the shared experiences and the understanding that comes with it. When I left the cafe, I felt energized. It wasn't just a casual conversation. It was a reminder that sometimes the things that make us happy can also lead us to meaningful connections with others. I wanted to share this with you all. Always cherish the things that bring you joy, no matter what others may think, because sometimes those very things are the key to unlocking new doors in your life.